Greetings, everyone. How are you doing? Everybody ready to go after filling your bellies with that wonderful lunch? If you fall asleep, just don't snore. That's all I ask, okay? And I'll try not to do the same thing. So I've spent a lot of time producing a lot of different stuff, and I mean stuff. And what I've found is every time we approach a new medium, people get nervous. They get scared. They're like, wait a minute, I know how to do the thing that I know how to do. But this new thing, what does that mean to my job? And we found out at the Producers Guild, we constantly discuss that. And we discussed that we should probably rename the new Media Council to something else. But when you go through all the different naming conventions, you'll sit there and you'll ask yourself, well, is it digital media? No, everything's digital now, can't do that. Is it the experiential stuff? Well, no, not really that. Finally, we settled on next new stuff. Can't really name it that, so we just went back to new media. But it really is the next new thing. And then what we pointed out in the guild is everybody wanted to go, we need to define it. Because producers like to define things, right? They want to describe what it is, they want to nail it down and say, this is what it is. But I said, you know what? Producers, face it, we're not going to define what VR is. My colleagues have done that earlier and things like that. What we can do is define the producer's job in VR. And we can describe that. But today I want to talk a little bit about what this thing is and how do we approach it and how to think about it. And I always do it with this sort of producer's mindset. When we approach today's VR, let's be perfectly honest with each other. It's this problem. Problem with VR today and AR is ergonomics. It's a box on face. Or with AR, how many people think that the AR revolution's here because you have a mobile phone, right? There's one guy, he was just fixing a shirt. So it's this woman. About this time I tell everybody's got a cell phone? Pull out your cell phone for a second. Go ahead, dig, cell phones, come on. You, just don't look at me like that. Pull out your cell phones, great. Hold up your cell phone, just like this. Assume the AR position. Now stay that way for the next 2 hours. You tell me this is comfortable, usable, exactly what I want to be doing with it. Later, go see Sean Stewart's talk. He'll talk about Magic Leap. We're starting to get there, but it's still something I strap on my face. It's cumbersome, uncomfortable. We see a lot of this, right? We're not quite there yet. We're getting there, but we got to make some improvements here because the ergonomics aren't quite there. Then we talk about consumer numbers. Boy, these are all over the map. I think I failed miserably last night in anybody attended the game show and coming up with the proper number. But the reality is, even this forecast over there is that number over there, and that really is a small number, depending on who you're talking about and what you're talking about. So also understanding the market, understanding what we're trying to appeal to, understand who you're targeting. Yep, there we go. Understand the use cases. All right. So I get a lot of people that are saying, I want to go make entertainment in this medium. That's fine, but also understand where a lot of people are starting to think about some of this stuff being usable. And I'm not saying don't go make entertainment. What I'm saying is also when you're thinking about making stuff, and let's face it, as a producer, sometimes I'm producing a series, sometimes I'm producing a commercial, sometimes I'm producing a how to drive a forklift, and that's okay. But it's kind of interesting because there's a whole lot of areas that some of this technology, and you could argue the numbers one way or the other, but video games, pretty big swath. Live events, healthcare, engineering, there's a lot of interesting things to be done here. And it isn't necessarily saying I'm going to make the next great television series in 360. Okay, I liked how it built in Keynote better, but let's not go into that. So creating experiences. This is what we're talking about, right? It's creating and using this medium for things that are interesting, not trying to replicate things that we did on a rectilinear surface necessarily, but it's about creating new and interesting experiences. I just picked one of them. I think this is kind of fun. You don't have to play the music because it's just a bad heavy metal beat. Nothing against heavy metal, it's just, I think it was stock music. But somebody said, you know what? Hey, it's fun doing these things indoors. What if we just strap now a VR player on the person's head and they really do have that sensation of jumping out of an airplane? Kind of an interesting approach. If you talk to Eric Shamlin, he'll tell you about his Jack Ryan experience, about them walking across a board, and he said, you know what the problem was is that they were trying to achieve throughput through an experience at Comic-Con, and everybody got stuck at the virtual walking across the board, and he was watching knees buckle. It was all in virtual reality, but it's hell on throughput when that's the second stage of a 5-stage process. But it's taking people to other places that they can't necessarily go. Now, I don't know how many of you have been to base camp. Probably even less of you have been to the top of Everest. As much as I want to go to base camp, I probably will never climb Everest. So this is an experience that I appreciate that somebody created and is giving that visceral, this is what it's like to be on that side of the mountain, in the Khumbu Icefall. Or in AR, simply creating interesting applications that say, what is that cathedral? Give me more information about it. Not everybody's going to walk around with necessarily an iPad. I hope not. That's a whole lot of this. But it's creating these enhanced experiences. It's putting people in locations. It's giving them more information. And every one of these aspects, I look at folks and say, you know, as a producer, we come back to figuring out what we want to create, planning it, shooting it, posting it, and then distributing it. And as much as we like to think that VR is special, you tell me that you don't go through those steps to do this. And if you miss one of those steps, you're probably going to screw it up. Purpose-driven. I like to focus on making people think, why are you doing this? For the last couple of years, who here has a 360 camera? A couple of you. When you first got that 360 camera, did you go out and just shoot something 360 because you could? Yep. Right, you do, right? I got a 360 camera. Fuck, I should shoot something Ooh, I said that. It happens at least once in my talks. I should shoot something 360. Did you need to shoot at 360? Did you scratch your head and say, what am I going to really shoot that needs to be 360? We're slowly, hopefully, moving through that stage of because I can to because I should. Just because we have a 360 camera in our arsenal doesn't mean every story needs to be 360. Sometimes, if you think of a different way of shooting it, maybe that's the best way to shoot it. We also, in this world, like to think of it's 360, only 360, or it's 2D rectilinear, or now 180. Why not 270? So starting to think about why we're creating things and putting purpose behind it and then going and using the tools. Because too often, and I can be accused of it, going, it's the new shiny thing, I want to go play with it. Fine, but what are you doing with it? What are you creating and what's the intent? In production, there's a lot of new fun fangled things. This is the new 8K camera, do live streaming with it and 8K streaming. What I think is fascinating is that you realize our field basically took many steps backwards. We had figured out how to stream media efficiently. We chunk it up into small bits, get it out there on small bandwidth. And then we came to 360 and we said, let's forget all that, go back to the beginning again. And now we're just slowly catching up to being able to efficiently stream this type of media using a tiled approach and other things. But we're beating our way through this. Point I will keep coming back to is think about it. Where we're at in this field is about it's the messy stage. We haven't all these things figured out. But as producers, frankly, we know where we want to get to. Now, as technologists, we have to figure out and solve some of the hard problems to get there. Again, the variations on a theme. Just about the time we were all going, hey, we love 360. 360 is great. Everybody said, screw that. Let's do 180. Not necessarily a bad thing. I would guarantee you that if I was standing here and shooting this room, 180 is probably good for me right now because I don't really care what's going back there, or I may just put a plate back there, frankly, because there's nothing really going on and I'm just going to stitch it later. Shooting 360 is hard. A good friend of mine, as a producer, she said, you know what, we finally figured out a way to solve the problem of 360 can see everything. She called it stacking. I said, Jackie, what's stacking? She goes, we find the largest person on the production, and then we put everybody behind them on the set. We only have to paint out one person. Okay. Or everybody in 360 production has done this. Right? Hide from the camera. Shooting nodally, not necessarily a bad thing, people. Being able to stitch it later, being able to light it the way you want to, be able to add sound, have somebody in the same room and direct it, not necessarily bad either. But again, what are you trying to shoot? Why are you trying to shoot it? I often have the same conversation with people about live. Everybody goes, let's do it live. Why? I love shooting live productions, but only if you have to. Because live, there's no coming back from live. It's live. And half the time you ask them, does it need to be live or can I give it just a little bit of delay? Adding new and interesting techniques. Volumetric capture. This is a shot from the meta stage. No offense to the people in Volumag that are here. Sorry, I didn't have a picture of yours. You can go see the Volumag over there in stage 3. Shameless plug. But volumetric capture, we're starting to figure it out. But let's face it, volumetric capture only answers some of the questions, and we're sitting here and looking at all these different pieces. We live in a world right now that we want the fidelity of live action capture, but we want the flexibility of a game engine. What is this thing in the middle? What is this thing in the middle? Why are you using something like a volumetric capture versus mocap and skinning? If you haven't seen a little bit of volumetric capture, nice gentleman. I think he's going to move. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe. No, he's not moving. He moved when I played with it up there. It doesn't really matter. He doesn't do much. Again, useful in some circumstances, but you got to know what those circumstances are. Oh, now he moves. Not bad. But again, it's got some limitations. You can go get the data out of one of those systems. You got to clean it up. A couple weeks later, you can use it. What are you going to use it for? Working with it is difficult if you want to change the lighting, although the nice part is those folks over there told me now they can play with flexible lighting solutions. Now I stuck this up there. It has nothing to do with 360 video, but it has a lot to do with input methods. This is the other thing that we have to start thinking about, that we're constantly developing, is I like to say AI to me isn't taking over the world, but it is a tool. And the point being is, how are you doing interfaces to this environment? So great, we've strapped a box on your face, then we put your hands in controllers that look nothing like your hands, and then ask those things to be remapped as hands in a UI. Not necessarily the best use, but that's what we got. Now we start doing things like leap motion so I can see your hands, but I have nothing physical to touch. So it's kind of weird because my hands are there, but I'm not really touching anything. Contextual-based interfaces are a thing that we have to think about. Being the context of where you are, what you're doing, the underlying system needs to understand what you want or have a premise of it so that it is an easier interface. And also be in a context, can I talk? Am I in a place where I can talk? Should I be using gestures? Everybody loves Minority Report as a movie. We all talk about a gestural-based interface. We're going to make Minority Report. If I ask you to sit there and wave your hands in the air doing this for the next half hour, you tell me this is ergonomically good for an interface method. It looked good for what's his name in the movie, not necessarily good as a long-term interface. So the different things around interface and how we ask people to interact with these environments is an important thing to think about. Now, I threw this fun video in there. How many of you have seen or played with a haptic glove from Haptics? There's one lone person there. Hi, out there. These guys have been developing this. The first time I tried it, it was a big, giant silver box. I'm not kidding. It was this huge thing. I stuck my hand in there, put a VR glasses on, and I felt things in my hand from virtual objects as if they were real. Now they've downsized it a bit. They are still along the way. Is this perfect? No, not at all. But we are starting to get there where that tactile sensation. I literally put a small creature in my hand. It was a deer. I felt 4 different hoof prints, and then it laid down in my hand, and my hand got warm. I was watching this happen, feeling this in my hand, and it was all virtual sensation from the glove. Now imagine if we start wrapping this around us. So, yes, Ready Player One is a ways off, but we're starting to see some of the advances here, because again, what is that feedback? What's going on? How are my senses being deceived or informed? So starting to think about some of those. And then some of the stuff that I'm working on at Digital Domain, where we're trying to get past the uncanny valley. Now, what I like to say is necessity is the mother of invention. It is also developing better production techniques so that we can get much more efficient at human capture to performance. There are people out there that say, AI is going to take over, it's going to put actors out of business. Well, I'd like to say in the short term, what we're going to do is enable actors to go back to acting. How many of you saw Avengers Infinity War? It's good news, more people than tested the haptic glove. Avengers Infinity War, so our team worked on Thanos. We took Josh Brolin, had him perform, and translated that into the digital character of Thanos. We had to ask Josh to stop overacting because he was so used to, in those environments, having to overact and emote to get the character to look proper, that he was basically making Thanos do weird things. So going to an environment where we can say, you know what? You don't have to put on all the prosthetics and things like that, just act. And we will capture that and put it into the digital character, and it will be Josh Brolin on the screen, but he's giant and he's purple and he's angry. So doing things like digital humans.
I am a fully simulated artificial replication capable of being driven and rendered in real time. That's pretty cool, right? So how do we do it? We start by capturing my face at the highest pore level resolution. We even measure how the blood flows in my face as I make different expressions. We have built a system that uses a variety of machine learning techniques to figure out exactly how the face moves.
Now, I have to say one thing about that. It looks a little quirky. Doug in real life is quirky. I've decided that he's our head of software development, a great guy. I had seen a number, before I had actually met him, I'd seen some of our internal demos. I'm like, it kind of has some weird twitching. I'm like, is that good? Then I met the guy, and I was like, no, that's just how Doug's face works. So that's Doug Robles. All that was a digital construct where getting to that point, now we can do human, lifelike, make it look amazing in pre-rendered. The next trick for us is now doing that in-game engine, live driving a character, whether it be off stage, halfway around the world, that sort of thing. And fun part is we're going to see some interesting stuff come spring. Distribution, let's not forget about that. Whether it be the location-based, and I think right now, this is a shot of a series of our location-based. Location-based is the interesting frontier for us right now. It's the arcade of the 80s moment, folks. It's where we can deploy amazing experiences unapologetically, right? We want to do high fidelity. We want to put people in these. We want to have all the cool bells and whistles. We want to spend a lot of money and make those things amazing. Why? Because we want to impress the hell out of them and say, you can't get it at home yet, but soon you will. This is where I think the interesting thing happens. I use the car dealership analogy. I say, you know what? Not every town has a Maserati dealer. Every town may have a Ford dealer. That's fine. You don't necessarily put the Ritz Rolls-Royce dealer in that lower income neighborhood. Same with LBE if we look at it. The variety of experiences here, there isn't one size fits all, and that's what's fun. You can have the fun arcade moments where we all go out and have the family fun center and compete against each other in a shooter, or we may want to go become a stormtrooper, and who doesn't want to become a stormtrooper? So think about it. Have the strategy. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Why are you using that system? I go back to When I'm a cinematographer, I'm using the best tool for the job. Tell the right story, right? What are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do it? Who are you doing it for? And I think above all else, always make something great. Unapologetically make something great. Thank you.